Hi everybody, Dhaman Mehta here, and thank you for once again joining me on my journey as I go through my favorites list on fanfiction.net. Let's just dive into these stories, starting with Pet na Campione-sama by Asakust. And this is a Campion fic that is focusing on basically like a slightly kind of like autistic version of the canon main character of Godou, and it's told only through the perspectives of the other people, of his companions, like people around him. I really did enjoy this fic. Like he's the main character of Godou is like a little slow in how not he's not dumb, but he definitely is like portrayed like that's why I was saying like I really feel like he's autistic because like he reacts at a slower pace in most situations and he makes some weird connections and mentally and so his off acting is constantly throwing everyone else off their rhythm while still being very endearing, and like his it still comes across as a very caring individual, even though he has like very limited actions he performs. It's fun hopping from POV to POV, mainly because the POV hops still keep the time, so it's like you're literally as soon as the time flow is the same. It doesn't have a lot of like rewind or jump cuts. It's literally from 1 minute to 10 minutes it's POV 1, and then from 10 minutes to 15 it's POV 2, and then 15 to 20. So like it's very easy to follow along even though you are jumping from camera to camera essentially. I did enjoy this a lot because the both again with the POVs, but also like just seeing all the characters and this go to engage in a way where it's not the typical pure just harem shenanigans of this stuff. It's more, it feels oddly more genuine because of his odd reactions. I wish there was more. This is really just one that didn't get very far. It basically just finishes his the initial trip that is like the start of the series, and then like a little bit like 1 or 2 chapters afterwards, and yet even though there's not much here, I have no problem coming back to this again and again and enjoying it just as much as I did the first time. It's going to stay on my list. Number 2 is It All Started in a Bank by LazyBum89. And this is a Harry Potter crossover with the Sherlock BBC series, where a 5-year-old Harry Potter and the Dursley family get caught up in a bank robbery where Sherlock, Watson, and Detective Inspector Lestrade are also there. And basically shit goes down that eventually leads to John and Sherlock adopting Harry. This is another one where like I had a lot of fun with this story. I am a bit of a, like I did enjoy the first 2 seasons of Sherlock a lot, so I thought the character interactions of John, Sherlock, and everyone else was done really well. Sadly, this story has a similar problem as with the previous one, where it stops right after it's finished its first like episode series or main plot, and then it just doesn't really get much further. But again, like the previous story, I do enjoy what's here a lot, even though there isn't much past that first main plot point and a little bit of pampering of Harry. I still found that all super enjoyable and entertaining and worth revisiting again and again. So it's again going to stay on my list. Next is Heart of Iron by Cavartiash or something, or Caviar. Oh my god, okay, it's on the screen, you can see it. So this is a Fate Stay Night Sekirei crossover where Shiro again ends up in the Sekirei game, but he's not an Ashikabi this time. He basically like comes across the aliens, and because he doesn't become an Ashikabi, he just thinks they're like dangerous, so he fights and then gets mistaken as another Sekirei. So that's the main plot, and like this is another story that again did not get very far. And while this one has a decent buildup of like Shiro's reputation near the end, and his friendship with Uzume is rather promising for like a thing that doesn't really have any romantic stuff going with our main guy. There just isn't, unlike the others, I never found myself wanting to come back to this story. There wasn't really anything that truly gripped me here that made me want to revisit these things. Whereas the other ones, even though it was a bit lighter, I definitely had no problem coming back to just the lighter moments and the character interaction here. Like, this one has a couple moments, but it wasn't enough for me to ever remember it or to come back and like want to seek it out again. I think it's fine, still in the realm of unfinished fanfics that didn't go very far, but like it's only worth really, I think, reading once, and so it's not going to stay on my list. Moving on, now we have The Answer by Every Dark Corner. And this is a time travel Final Fantasy VII story where Cloud, adult Cloud, goes back in time to his first days at Shinra and pals around with Zack and Sephiroth. And the story, that summary, that one sentence summary makes it sound a lot more wacky than it actually is. Like, what we actually get and what we see is a few scenes of Cloud trying to change Sephiroth's path by hanging out with him and Zack over the course of a few years, and then like it just keeps jumping, and eventually we get to the Nibelheim mission, which ends with him waking back up in present day. The main idea of the story, like after he wakes up, the main idea gets like literally shoved into our faces, and like the point of it gets told, which leaves a really bittersweet taste to the end. It does really give off a kind of pointless feeling, sort of, since like nothing actually changes. But the Doctor Who quote that the author prefaces the epilogue with kind of sums it all up in a sense, which I'll just read it out here. It's like, the quote is, because why would it's like what's the point of having the good times? Like, because every time you see them happy, you remember how sad they're going to be, and it breaks your heart. Because what's the point of being happy now if they're just going to be sad later? The answer is, of course, because they're going to be sad later. So, like, the main thrust is that, like, yes, Sephiroth in the end didn't change and nothing happened, but you changed his life because you gave him some happy moments where before he had none. It still feels a bit pointless and even a bit unearned because we really only see a few of the moments where they interact, and it didn't really feel particularly close, other than the scene in the epilogue, which only is like shown after the point and that quote is thrown at you. I think it's decent enough, like, and if you agree with the point with that quote and stuff, like, I think it's fine, and I would recommend it as a reread once, but at the same as a read once. But this is one that I don't see myself ever coming back to, so I recommend this and read it, but at the same time, for things on my favorites list are things that I want to reread again and again, so it's not going to stay on my favorites list. Alright, next is Harry Potter and the Gift of Memories by the Engulfing Silence. This is a Harry Potter fic that the main change is Harry has, there's a couple changes. Harry has perfect memory, photographic memory, and like, just overall, this is a story that I just never gave a shit about while reading. You know, Harry has a photographic memory, which also makes him very, apparently, I guess, like, the idea is to make him more analytical because he can remember everything, but he really, what it comes off as is he's a cold, basically, almost like towing the line of sociopathic mastermind, where he's just moving pieces and stuff and mentally chess piecing everything. Were there parts I enjoyed? Yeah, I liked Harry's interaction with his muggle friend Lisa and wish there had been a lot more of that. But I found this Harry, like, just really irritating to follow and was never invested in seeing more of him. This story does have two sequels, which eventually like go through years up to year 3. So if you, unlike me, can actually like this Harry and want to see more of him, you can get like three Hogwarts years worth of stuff, but I just never cared about this guy, and it's gonna fall off my list. Second to last for this video, we have So You Think Your Friend is Magical by Silent Maggie. And this is a Harry Potter fic that says crack. I don't know. It's mainly just about how all the magical world and everything in it is completely illegal and are shooting themselves in the foot constantly while Harry tries to get out of the mess. Like it's a bit of it's more of a world building story than really Harry take, where like there's minor things that Harry's doing, but really it's all about, oh, look at this part of the world and how like let's look at it through this lens. So, oh, that's illegal. Like, oh, the Ministry of Magic is basically a illegal entity that does nothing. Or hey, the ICW, like the only people that get mentioned are these three countries. What if we made that mean that, oh, there's really no other countries in there and it's all just reputation saying they're international and stuff like. It's all stuff like that. There's a bit of overarching plot to like escape the Wizarding World that moves pretty slowly over the course of these chapters, but the main point of each chapter is to point at a new piece of the world. Like I said, like let's look at the ICW in this chapter and see how that part's illegal or that part's really dumb and not doing anything, and just again pointing each one. It's labeled as crack, but it's really actually pretty damn grounded. And honestly, it's not. I don't feel like it's crack at all. It's just slight humor and more just pointing out stupidity. Like honestly, like it's slightly humorous, but honestly, rather than a comedy or anything, I would consider this more a spy thriller, as it's all about like a small group that we focus on uncovering and trying to work around a huge conspiracy. It just comes off as like slightly amusing, but again, like the main thrust honestly seems to be more about like just uncovering thing after thing in shadows, and it's not really, again, this one's not complete. um I found some of the ideas interesting, and like the overarching idea kind of was interesting to me, but because it's not complete and it's more just like points of like this could be illegal if looked at this lens and stuff like that, it's didn't seem really worth reading more than once. This is another one of those that's going to fall off my list. All right, and the last story for this video is Harry Potter and the First Stand by Dagunth. And this is a Harry Potter crossover with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, in the sense that Harry has a stand. I never read JoJo before. I've still only seen like the very first episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so I don't really know much about it. I know the idea of stands and stuff. And this story, the plot is just like Harry, as a 7-year-old, reads the manga and decides he wants to have a stand. He wants to go around traveling the world and fighting bad guys with his stand that he just makes out of magic. And then he leaves his house, and then 4 years later, he ends up at Hogwarts. This is another story that might as well just be a writing prompt, because like it's only 2 chapters, which is really just again like very much basic setup of, okay, this is how this, like, it's basically just like first chapter is, okay, this is the changing point. Okay, Harry gets a thing, and then it just jumps to, this is where we would drag him back to Hogwarts and how he would interact at the sorting, and like that's basically it. Essentially this could be looked at as just a writing prompt, and without aside from using this as a jumping off point, as a pure reader, it's pretty dull, uninteresting, easily skippable. It's gonna fall off my list. And there we have it now. Fanfiction status time. I have now read 822 stories, and 393 of them have stayed on my list. So again, thank you for watching. If you want to read any of these stories yourself, links are in the description, as well as links to my fanfiction.net profile, other forum where I post this, and link to the playlist of this entire series if you want to watch the videos from the beginning. Thank you so much for watching, and